question was asked of me the other day, why am I studying the greasy combatives curriculum for grappling? Why not, if I want to learn grappling, why not just experiment with partners and such and develop my own? That developing my own would be the more artistic approach rather than adopting somebody else's curriculum. I could have my own form of grappling that I come up with myself. And while I definitely appreciate the idea of developing your own, and I think, you know, for certainly a person could, I do want to, you know, say that ultimately, no matter what you're coming up with, what you're practicing or what you're learning, all of that learning is always relational, and this is something that I think needs to be kept in mind. All of knowledge production and learning and this kind of a thing, it's always in a relational context. I don't agree with the Western perspective or the Western emphasis on individualism, like heavy individualism, and this notion of discovery as part of the knowledge process. Because when people talk about discovery and such, or even a lot of times of creating things and discovering things in the artistic process, with that language, they're leaving out the very real relational context in which all of these things arise. Nothing just comes of its own or from you. Always there are prior exposures, prior influences that play a role in your expectations of what you might create. Always there is some relational factor in the creative process itself. It doesn't even have to be like a person that's teaching you. For instance, you know, I've been learning how to use a short staff or Joe on my own by interacting with the wood itself. So it's like the stick itself is teaching me, but it's not alone, because I do have prior influences. You know, I have played around a little bit with Joe in my prior Aikido training. You know, I have definitely seen things online, and I've purposely went and looked at things online for ideas for techniques that I might want to learn and that kind of a thing. I've been exposed to, you know, lots of martial arts film where short sticks are used and that kind of thing, or shorter sticks. So all of these things play a role. Hey, it's not like it just comes out of me all by myself, but it is an artistic process. What I've developed with that short stick, or what I've been training, is, you know, is different than what others train. The movements that I've been experimenting with are, you know, kind of my own, but at the same time, I respect that it's all relational. Yeah, it's my art, but it's not my art discovered and created in a social vacuum where it's just coming from me. And there are times when you're learning when you want to rely on expertise. If someone has developed a really good expertise in something, and you have access to that person, and that training from that person, then I think it's wise to take advantage of the expertise, especially in certain situations. And I'll give you an example. Say, for instance, someone here in southern Alberta wants to learn about the edible plants here, and how they can use these plants as food. Now, someone in that situation could come to me and pay me to teach them, and I would teach them, and they could benefit from what I've learned from, you know, a lot of years of study and practical application. And I don't know everything, but I could teach them what I learned, what I know, and it would benefit them. It would take them a long ways into the edible plant world of southern Alberta. Or this person could, you know, look at the literature and that kind of a thing, and try to learn from the literature what plants are edible and experiment with themselves like that, in which case they're still learning really from a human source that put together a resource for them to learn from. Or they could go out into the plant community and just start experimenting by themselves with this notion that they're discovering and creating their own way of learning the edible plants. And if they experiment with the wrong plants in that manner, they'll be dead. And so there are you know, times when it's intelligent to utilize a resource person who has a lot of expertise. You can make huge gains in very short time in terms of your practical knowledge by going to that resource person and having them show you what they know. It's not everything, and you don't got to take all of what they have to show you, and you don't have to be limited by that. You can see what they know, take what you want from that, and, you know, move on. Maybe there are other resource persons you can go to for other things, other aspects of what you're trying to learn, and you know, take a piece from here and a piece from there. Learn, do your own experimenting and develop your own things where it's, you know, very appropriate and such. But you can make huge gains in learning by going ahead and relying on resource persons. You don't always have to try to reinvent the wheel, although you don't want to be limited by what someone else has come up with. But if you recognize that all learning is relational anyway, that you're never learning in a vacuum, that you're always learning in relation to some other, then going to an expert for a transfer of their knowledge is nothing different than what you're going to be doing anyway. But with this particular expertise, it's going to take you a long ways in a short time to where you want to go, and then from there you can break new grounds. It just, to me, I recognize that learning is always relational, that it's a social phenomenon. It doesn't occur just on an individual basis alone. Even if you don't recognize it, it is relational. If you do recognize it, I think that's the healthier way to approach learning, because in cultures where it's recognized that learning is relational, then you have respect for what you're learning from. I mean, I see a lot in Western culture, because of this notion of discovery or creation and the heavy emphasis on individuality. They feel ethically okay with the experimentation on other sentient beings, animals and such, and feeling like our human life is worth more than theirs, and so we have a right to just experiment on them, and put them in deplorable conditions and do terrible things to them, so that we can learn something, so we can discover something. And they don't give any credit to the animals or respect to the animals for teaching us all of these things. Everything that we have, ultimately, I source everything that we have and everything that we know, ultimately, to the creatures who have been here far longer than us. And I have a heavy respect for them that a lot of other people don't have. And that respect comes from, is anchored in the recognition that our learning, that's where our learning derives, that it's relational, and that ultimately it's sourced in our observations of or encounters with other animals. So I don't feel weird at all learning somebody's curriculum, but I'm not going to be limited by their curriculum. I can learn a certain curriculum from an expert as a foundation or jumping off point to other things, and that's what I'm doing with the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Their combatives course I'm using that as a foundation to a ground grappling knowledge and practice. And there are a lot of things that I'm learning in that are just, it might take me, if I was just experimenting, it might take me years to learn it, to figure that out on my own, or if it came to an actual violent encounter, what I learned on my own might not be as effective without this or that little trick that I could pull from their expertise. So to me, it doesn't make sense not to learn from them. And so that's my approach. I do, though, definitely have a respect for the idea that you do want to engage in a creative process, and not just be limiting your learning in life to what others have developed. But yeah, to me, it's learning from others who are experts to get a foundation on something to develop further in relation to others in a more experimental sense at that point, where you already have a foundation to work from. And so yeah, that's my perspective on learning. It's relational. It's always relational. It's deceptive to speak about it in terms of discovering creation as if it was just a person learning it by themselves in a vacuum, in a social vacuum. That's not really the case. That's not really accurate to how knowledge is produced and transferred, and so that's my perspective on it.